Emotions are still pretty raw when you talk about the Browns fan base and Nick Chubb signing with the Houston Texans. And everybody might not be ready just yet, but it is time to look forward to the future of the Cleveland Browns running back, which most certainly will be based around Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson. Browns 3D on the OBR begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. We appreciate all of you who support us here at the OBR, whether it's reading the written content daily or joining us every night at 6 p.m. for the OBR streaming network, beginning with Browns 3D. You will get Barry McBride and Fred Greetham at 7 tonight, so make sure everybody sticks around for that. And as always, make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube, and of course, subscribe to the OBR over on Twitch. Maybe I'm forcing some to rip the Band-Aid off a little bit early and trying to, get to being positive about the state currently of the Cleveland Browns running back room. Nick Chubb has, and we all know now, moved on to the Houston Texans. And we should have known it was coming. And certainly the selections of Quinshon Judkins in round 2 of the draft and then Dylan Sampson in round 4 of the draft solidified it. However, maybe the finality certainly came earlier this week, Sunday, when Nick Chubb did agree to terms with the Houston Texans, then passed his physical on Monday, allowing the contract to go into place. There's been so much talk about Shedeur Sanders and the quarterback position this entire offseason, and certainly through rookie minicamp, and certainly through the OTAs, and now certainly through um, mandatory minicamp. But I think Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson are kind of getting slept on early to this point. Judkins has been impressive with his quickness, with his vision. Had a long run at practice today, which actually had a nice jumble set to it. It was trips to the right. Dylan Sampson lined up as a slot receiver, kind of did a jet sweep motion, ended up kind of playing off like a draw. And, Judkins found daylight in the middle of the field and was able to take it to the distance. Quinshon Judkins' college career speaks for itself. He was straight up dominant. And most probably just recall this past fall in Columbus playing for the Buckeyes. But as a true freshman at Ole Miss, he ran for, over 1,550 yards. His second year, he was 1,158 yards. This year, it was a smaller sample size, less touches in Columbus, of course, with the Buckeyes. But still, you got him well over 1,000 yards, scoring 14 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns through the air. He averages 15 touchdowns per season, Quinshon Judkins. That is what he averaged throughout his college career. And now, do I think, this is going to get anybody to change their opinion, on the Nick Chubb situation anytime soon? It's probably not, and I understand that. Nick was more than just, a great player. Became certainly, with this team who was just always lacking the quarterback during the Nick Chubb tenure. Nick kind of became the face of the offense for the Cleveland Browns. And at many times, he was the offense for the Cleveland Browns. But for the Browns, this was kind of always the model. And the way they're shaped now and led, of course, Andrew Berry, Paul DePodesta behind the scenes, the approach on analytics. This was the mold for an analytic thinking front office. And it was strength in numbers, not necessarily, the headliner of a running back room. When they got here in 2020, they had Nick Chubb in year 3 and year 4 of his rookie deal. Now, in those 2 years, Nick Chubb performed so admirably well. They forced the hand of the analytic front office to go ahead and go away from the analytics, essentially, and sign Chubb to a long-term deal. Nick performed well on that deal, as we all know. 2022 was an absolute monster, almost 1,600 yards on the ground. Then, of course, the injury in 23, limited playing time in 24 as he was rehabbing from the injury, suffered a broken foot. And keeping in mind that the Browns did pay him for 2024, gave him a deal for 2024 when they didn't necessarily have to due to the fact that he wasn't. That was always difficult, and keeping in mind Nick's serious injury before he even got to the league. So again, I understand, the difficulties of this situation, but looking at where this room is now, and of course, with the presence that Quinshon Judkins is, and certainly when we're talking about, the former SEC Offensive Player of the Year, Dylan Sampson. And we may have not gotten as much look at Sampson yet as we certainly have Quinshon Judkins, but it was an impressive career in Tennessee, and even more so impressive in the fall of 2024 when Dylan Sampson was finally given the opportunity to be running back one down in Knoxville for the Volunteers. I would say both players definitely need to find a way to step up as far as being contributors into the passing game. There's not a running back besides maybe Travion Henderson that you can talk about, as far as their pass protection skills needing to improve, going, of course, from the collegiate level to the NFL level. All things that these guys are going to have to work on. And unfortunately, things that you're really not going to be able to improve upon until you truly get pads on, of course. But the Browns are adding almost, 27, 2,800 total yards between the two of these guys from the past fall. And it was not going to be a situation where, if you were going to use a second round pick on a running back, you were basically doing that with the thought process of he should be ready to go from day one, which is certainly the correct approach to use. Unlike 2018 when the Cleveland Browns selected Nick Chubb in the second round and he waited around for a while and then finally forcing John Dorsey to trade Carlos Hyde so that Hugh Jackson had no choice but to start the rookie running back, Nick Chubb, who was the 10-time player. Nobody wanted an awkward situation where Nick Chubb was here and maybe not playing. Because, look, there's no guarantees. And I've heard 1,000 people, well, what if he goes off? What if he goes off? What if he goes off? But a very, very minute amount of people who are actually saying, well, maybe Nick just will never be close to what he was. And maybe Nick at best would just be an average guy. And that's fair. And I think, for us, it's, we're certainly looking at this through orange colored glasses, of course, for all that Nick has done for the franchise, all that Nick has done on the field, how much the fan base loves him, how great he's been in the community. But I think it's time to give a fair due here to Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson. We're going to get to know these guys better as, training camp opens, preseason games, regular season. These guys have been solid contributors as running backs at the collegiate level in the Big Ten, certainly in the SEC. It's their time. And, it's always difficult with any player, when their time with a franchise, especially somebody as special as Nick, is over. And it's even always more difficult when it's a running back. It's just a short-lived position. And unfortunately, the greater they do, the better they play. Most likely, the quicker their time with said team is done. You look in all the great running backs in NFL history, almost all of them, at one time or another, moved on from the franchise that they had basically become synonymous with. But Q and Dylan Sampson are the here and the now. They are the future, which also became a weird spot as well. And if you didn't catch the react last night, Pete Smith brought this up, which was I really thought was a fantastic point. If you notice, there's some people heavily within the Browns community, whether it's the media, whether it's the content creators, and if you find the ones who are so solemnly pushing to start either Shador Sanders or Dylan Gabriel as quickly as they possibly can. And then you see the same ones that are essentially saying, well, yeah, it was a terrible move to move on from Nick Chubb. That's where, and again, this is Pete's point, which I think is fantastic. Is, well, what is it? Or, is it, saying it's a soft rebuild, but it's actually a hard rebuild? Because if you're pushing so quickly for the rookie quarterbacks to play, don't you kind of want to get them acclimated and playing with what's going to be their core for the next few seasons? So even if Nick was here, you know, zero guarantees, Nick would have been here in 26 or 27. So it seemed odd that you would take a stance on going with the young rookie quarterback, but trying to also pair him with the going to turn 30 in December running back. If it's going to be the kids, and I highly believe it's going to be the kids, and it's going to be the kids sooner than later, they should be getting acclimated and playing with the guys who are going to be, you know, their part, Nick Chubb, Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, Shador Sanders, Jerry Jeudy, Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson. You want to start working on what that core is for whoever this team's quarterback of the future is. If it's not Gabriel or Sanders, somebody that could be coming here in next April, of course. So it didn't make sense for anybody who's taking a stance for the rookie quarterbacks, but in the same breath trying to make a stance for Nick Chubb. Again, it wasn't money. Browns would have paid him if it really wanted to work out. I think it was more of a situation where the Browns didn't want him here if he was not going to be able to perform up to what has become very large expectations for a guy like Nick Chubb, who has been such a dominant and quality performer in his time with Cleveland. And if he wasn't performing well, it certainly would have made for some awkwardness for somebody who has all the respect in the building, all the respect in the city. And, who wants to be the one, for all that Nick did for this franchise to sit down and say, hey, you might be inactive this week. We're not going to ask you to play specials. Ideally, you're the third string running back. I don't know how many touches you're going to get. Sometimes you have to see the situation and see the way it's going to unfold or where it could unfold or it could lead to, and try to make the decision before it gets to that. And I kind of think that's where it was for the Browns. And certainly, I think this decision was certainly set in stone before the draft. And that is certainly what led to the, selection of two running backs in this draft. I think also the other thing is the Browns knew what an impactful running back class this was in 2025. And if they had found a way to continue to make it work with Nick for at least one more season, they would have missed out on what was an absolutely deep and thorough running back class here. You can only keep so many. Roster spaces get extremely tight. And, with Nick, who does not play special teams, ideally is not your third down running back. If you're just a backup running back in the NFL, there's other things you have to do, which, usually require playing special teams. Too dangerous for Nick to play. And at this point, it's almost disrespectful to ask Nick to play special teams. There were a lot of factors in the way that this all worked out. And again, if you're still of the, you know, hurt heart type of thing, I get it. I do. I'm just trying to paint a little positivity here to where this room is currently at and what the potential of this room is for 2025 and certainly going further. You have both of these guys locked in for the same amount of service time, 4 years apiece. So 25, 26, 27, 28 of Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson in that backfield. I think Jerome Ford is a factor in 2025, but I think, whatever Jerome Ford does in 2025 is most likely going to lead to Jerome Ford performing somewhere else in 2026. Again, Nick Chubb was the analytic deal breaker that led to an analytic franchise extending a running back. I doubt there's ever going to be another one again. Maybe Judkins or Sampson, but it's way too early to tell. But for a guy like Jerome Ford, who they already basically talked out of $1.9 million, Jerome Ford could go out there this year and be a world beater. But most likely Jerome's Ford future after 2025 is certainly within a different city. Deontay Johnson once again in today, of course, that mandatory mini camp. Um, Johnson did do some press availability. Um, the media asked certainly about, what went on last season as Deontay Johnson basically did a tour of the NFL between Carolina, Baltimore, Houston, and then I think Baltimore again. I think I have that right. You've got to ask if you're in the media. Deontay Johnson obviously, sidestepped around it by not answering, of course. But I think what you notice is you certainly can see the ability from Deontay Johnson is still present on the field. And with Cedric Tillman currently still unavailable, Michael Woods still unavailable, Jamari Thrash, you know, appearing to maybe show some signs. Of course, David Bell unavailable as well. This Browns wide receiver room still right now is very much for me a question mark. Deontay Johnson can definitely alleviate some concerns of the questions about this room. And it's just going to have to be continuation. You know what I'm saying? It's just going to have to be that, we see Deontay perform admirably like he has this week, certainly. Then, of course, getting in to training camp in, mid to late July when the Browns break and just having him continue. He is a fantastic route runner, has great body control. He is quicker than he is fast. You see him having the ability, just from the brief time we've seen him in a day or two now, of, understanding, where the open spot is on a given route. There was a speed out today where it looked like he actually probably cut it a little bit shorter than, normally you would. But he kind of just, felt the presence of the coverage and the way it was and exactly where he needed to be in order to get the ball. And I'm pretty sure it was Shador, get the ball, or maybe it was Gabriel, but, to make the throw easier for his quarterback. He has a high level of intelligence as far as, finding the window for the quarterback to find him. And certainly was an asset, when things were going right in Pittsburgh. Certainly, a lot of things have been issues in Pittsburgh, and what, last year just obviously could not find a comfort zone anywhere for, Deontay Johnson with whatever, went on for him last year, certainly. But, for him to hopefully continue and be able to stack days together and stack together impressive moments, again, it does not help my concern level for the wide receiver room. It eases it some. I still think you would want one more guy after that. Certainly Cedric Tillman could certainly help in easing that as well. And I still believe the Browns are going to be highly linked to the wide receiver market between now, certainly all through the summer. And it could be even a week by week basis, once we hit the regular season, of course, in September. But early returns for Deontay Johnson, positive, and which is good. I mean, you need a veteran presence in that room. You need somebody that certainly can create space, can get open, and certainly can catch the ball when thrown to him. And, Deontay Johnson does have that track record to him. So hopefully, whatever Deontay Johnson's issues were, hopefully they are certainly back burnered for now. Again, Joe Flacco today, limited. And, look, the Browns told you there was going to be no exact plan. The Browns told us there was going to be no precise plan of just how everything was going to work out at the quarterback position. I think you're seeing with both Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders, you're starting to see, the comfortability factor of both of these young players starting to pick up a little bit more patience, a little bit more of, going through the progressions. Dylan appeared to be working the ball a little bit more vertically down the field today, something that we've seen from Sanders, not so much Dylan Gabriel up to this point. And Are they to the point where maybe they're a little more comfortable and maybe performing a little bit better than Kenny Pickett? One can say that, but one can also say, though, that Kenny Pickett, for the most part, is going against the better competition. But, Dylan putting together, a pretty good day today certainly is not stopping anybody in all the conversation that is going towards Shedeur Sanders, and in my opinion, it's rightfully so. Again, just Shedeur Sanders just really appears to, be fitting in extremely well and finding a comfortable level within this offense that suits some of the finer skills of his skill set that he has. We all know that, red zone, things like that, Coach Stefanski has loved kind of working between the hashes to the back part of the goal line. And you certainly saw a touchdown pass from Shedeur Sanders there today, was able to manipulate the defense with his eyes, have look left, come back right, hit, basically, that skinny post right by the goal post. If anybody remembers, this is a play I went nuts about at the end of the Raider game where Deshaun Watson just chose not to throw it. And, you know, you watch Shedeur's red zone work from Colorado, and it was probably some of the most impressive part of his tape. And that's obviously crucial. You know what I'm saying? It's the red zone. It's the money zone. It's basically where everything that matters. And, yes, certainly, you're working in a more smaller, confined area. But, for Shedeur, he ate there and ate well at Colorado. Certainly, with Hunter and, of course, the other wide receivers that were probably underrated from Colorado, but certainly worked well with Shedeur. I don't know, or I'm not going to pretend to sit here and, tell you exactly how this is going to work out. But I keep telling you how I think it should work out, and I think it would work out. And I think we're getting to a point now, but keep in mind it's late June that's mid-June, I should say, as opposed to late August. So certainly there's, 9, maybe 10 weeks where certainly this can all change. But it's looking more and more to me like I think Kenny Pickett is going to be the odd guy out. And, the Browns can tell us how much they love him, how much they adore him. We can have other people try to will that Kenny Pickett is the way it's going to go because he was the first one, the Browns acquired in the offseason. He's not better than Joe Flacco right now. And Shedeur and Gabriel are just coming on fast and closing whatever gap there is between Pickett and themselves. If you told me only 2 quarterbacks would start games for the Cleveland Browns in 2025, I would say in a heartbeat it will be Joe Flacco and Shedeur Sanders. I think we're going to get to this point somewhere in August where I think Kenny Pickett is going to probably be moved. I just don't see a spot here for Pickett. I've been on record saying, heck, I would just throw the rookies out there and let's see what happens. Not sure they're going to do that. So certainly you would want a veteran to, get this team out on the highway of September and then work the rookies or Shedeur in when you feel they are ready. If this team is capable of winning 6 or 7 games in 2025, in all honesty, it does nothing for me to go and win 6 or 7 games here in 2025 with Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett. It's not setting things for the future at any time whatsoever. It's just, it would be a lost year in my opinion. Kenny Pickett is not a long-term answer here for the Cleveland Browns. Maybe if Joe Flacco was 7 years younger, we could say, hey, maybe there's a 3-year run here for Joe Flacco in Cleveland. Again, that is not the case, though. So there is no future for Joe Flacco here in Cleveland either. And it certainly comes down to the fact that the Browns will possess 2 first-round picks next year in April, and what potentially could be a much better quarterback class than we just had this past April. So the Browns would want to have every idea of what Shador and Dylan Gabriel can give to this team for starting the 2026 draft process, with certainly major topics of discussion to be had within the front office, within, of course, the scouting department in regards to the quarterbacks in the 2026 class. Got one more tomorrow, of course, one more mandatory mini camp. And it's getting pretty much close to full-on summer mode here in the NFL. But it'll be here sooner than you know it. It always does. And we all go out, we live our summers, we have a good time, and next thing you know, it's right back to football 24/7, 365. But I'm going to continue, on the running backs, because I really, because I think you want to be able to look at, one situation, certainly the Nick Chubb situation, as one thing, but look at the Quinshon, Judkins, Dylan Sampson, Jerome Ford here in 2025, and kind of be able to appreciate that. So kind of look at, the situation certainly of, the moving on from Nick as one thing, but also the future of this room between, Q, Sampson, and Jerome Ford as, a whole other topic of discussion. Jerome Ford just gets beat like a dog for some reason by a lot of you people. And, 1,200 total yards in 2023, 9, 10 touchdowns. I forget the exact number. I think it was 9. Certainly an integral part of that team's success in 2023. And certainly a huge part, of how that team ended up getting to the playoffs. Last year, he was good on what was an overall bad product. Good. I didn't say great. But again, it's about, what this team is going to look like, here in 25 and to 26 and 27. Because, I think one of the most major things that's going to come to this team next offseason certainly would be a wide receiver as well. You want to get that second guy in. You want that true wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. They'll give Cedric Tillman the, chance. But unfortunately, if Cedric Tillman's not out performing right now, the longer it takes him to get back to the field, the smaller the window he has to prove to this franchise as to just what he could be. But, once Cooper moved on and he did go play the X, found a way to certainly succeed over the middle, won a lot of one-on-ones. He's not very easy to tackle. He's a big, big boy at 6'3" and over 220 pounds. So it's vital, that they get an opportunity for Tillman to, prove that 3-week stretch last season was just not a mirage, that he is truly capable of being this type of guy over a 17-game regular season schedule. So certainly vital for, Cedric Tillman to get back to the field ASAP, of course. We'll get another run, of course, tomorrow at the quarterback battle. We'll see how they handle, and divvy up, the repetitions, whether it's 11 on 11, 7 on 7, or certainly, red zone. 2-minute drill. They got a little bit in today. I think it was Pickett and it was Shador and Dylan all got their opportunities there. Just trying to, create game-like situations and certainly working at a rapid pace so they can get as many repetitions, of course, as possible, for all the quarterbacks that they currently have rostered. You will get Barry McBride and Fred Greetham up at 7 today. It will be our weekly. Fred has been in Berea for OTAs thus far this week. We'll be in again tomorrow, so you get some great insight from Fred. So make sure you stick around and listen to that. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube. Of course, the OBR over on Twitch. Appreciate you all for supporting us here, whether, of course, it's reading the daily content every single day or joining us beginning at 6 o'clock every evening on the OBR streaming network, Browns 3D, and then a variety of other great shows throughout the week to get you as much of the best Cleveland Browns information as we can possibly give. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR. And we will talk to y'all tomorrow.